without.
Certainly I am.
High pitched when I tested them. So
my husband's never complained about me being quiet and retiring and shy. So, lovely to be here in person and see a few of our faces that are just little screen idols usually. So it's very good to be here. We have got a few apologies, Craig, haven't we? So yes. I wonder if we might just have a quick run through, and then I think we'll have a name and shame who we are.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a few apologies received, so I'll just go through these briefly. So apologies from Mark Axel, Black Country Integrated Care Board, Councillor Bell from Warwickshire, Councillor Bevan from Dudley, Councillor Khan from Coventry, Councillor DeSico from Solihull, Councillor Gutteridge from Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, Councillor Hartwell from Sandwell, Councillor Jaspow from Wolverhampton, Lisa Stally Green from Birmingham and Solihull Integrated Care Board, Peter Wilson, West Midlands Fire Service, Mike Wade in his dual role from the Office for Health Improvement and Midlands, but we do have Mike Substitute Geary here with us this morning, and Justin Barney, but we do have Justin's substitute Becky here with us this morning.
Excellent, thank you very much. And yes, and anything else to report? You look as if you're about to. Yes.
Just to note that thank you all for attending. However, the meeting is in quorate, so just as before, the notes and actions from the recommendations will be taken to the WMCA board for ratification on the 12th of January.
Lovely, thank you very much. And as promised before, I think why don't we just, for benefit of everybody, just sort of introduce ourselves whilst we're here in person. And should we start over with you?
Councillor Karen McCarthy from Birmingham.
Welshire House, I'm the head of health communities at West Midlands Combined Authority.
And Councillor Izzy Seckham, chair of the board.
Hello everyone, Craig Evans, Government Services Officer from the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Good morning, I'm Sean Russell from Coventry University, representing the university's students.
Giri Rajaratnam, I'm Mike Wade's deputy and I act as the Deputy Regional Director and Deputy Regional Director of Public Health for the Midlands.
And Rachel Clifford, Senior Delivery Manager for Health, Communities and Mental Wellbeing, West Midlands Combined Authority.
Hello everybody, I'm Helen Frost. I'm the Senior Programme Lead for Inclusive Communities from the West Midlands Combined Authority.
I'm Becky Hart-Jones, I'm the Assistant Director of Public Health at Birmingham City Council.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Becky, for being here. Lovely. And welcome to our visitors too. Excellent. Thank you. Great. So, yes, so we are in quorate. We do need to get decisions ratified, but we'll just, we'll go through it and we'll get the opinions as well. What substitutes? So, let's see, Chair's opening remarks. Well, firstly, I think it's, it is particularly good to be back into the office and to be here in person. I think it would be good to encourage more. And so we have the ability to get to know each other well. And, there's nothing quite like being able to discuss issues to try to sort of give some real colour and spark ideas. So the more of that, the better. Perhaps that can be a New Year's resolution. So we'll try and encourage that as well. We've got a little to get through today, not least around the deep devolution deal and how that's landed, where it's going. I know many local authorities are also closely involved back at the ranch with setting budgets, which is difficult at the moment. It's a particularly challenging time. But the input and the additionality that this board can do to help us in our journey on the in front of public health and in our local authority journey, I think is invaluable. So the more that we can do together, the better. But it will be just an interesting meeting if we can sort of try and find out how this is landing, how we can spread the knowledge further through the constituent and non-constituent members, and how this is going to unravel over the next year too. Also, this is about local authorities getting that added value. So I think the experience of what local authorities in their own sphere are doing is incredibly useful for us to hear. So I would encourage more discussion around that, which will help us to consider what steps we need to take to best serve our residents. I'm not going to say very much more on that, as really the agenda is laid out before us. And I think, if I may, I just want to ratify the minutes that we held on the 6th of March. I've got
That's a lot.
okay. Well, that I've got the previous minutes. What July is that? 3rd of July. There you go. 3rd of July. So we held our last meeting on the 3rd of July. Gosh, that seems ages ago. Goodness me, and here we are with Christmas nearly upon us. I've got 3 pages. I wonder if I can just run through the page by page for any matters arising or any corrections, starting with page 1.
Chair, sorry, I just a quick correction.
Yeah.
I had an email from Mike Wade last week, just to say in relation to the minutes, a correction in his representation. It's got him noted as just NHS England, so I just need to update that to Office for Health Improvement and Disparities.
Yeah. Health improvement. Okay. Page 2. Page 3. And there's just a scribble at the top of page 4. Can we agree those as a correct rendition of that meeting? And I will take that as agreement. And then if we can move on to the agenda item 5, I think it is. Fallen off the top of the page, which is the feedback from the board development day. Mubashir, are you going to just start us on this one?
I will. Thank you very much. So thank you for all that have been able to make it in today. I think we wanted to try and have it in person. Chaired, I believe, the conversation on the day in October was very much about wanting to try and see if we can do hybrid sessions as much so that it encourages more participation. And perhaps something we need to think about, given the fact that we have very few people here in person today, that we should be thinking about having virtual sessions going forward and less. And so this is the reason why I say that is because I think in this governance paper, we need to dial in a colleague from governance, Julia Cleary, if we can, because they were expecting to dial in. And they, if you remember, we haven't met since the 3rd of July as an official board meeting, but we met in October for a development day session. And that was facilitated by the governance team in the combined authority. And the topic of discussion was actually how do we organize the board in a way which is more meaningful, and it utilizes the considerable leadership qualities of the members from local authorities, and to be able to align itself to the health and all policies approach that we're promoting within the Wellbeing Board. So the three main things here within this are very much about the membership and getting more engagement with members, the Mayor's Health Equity Advisory Council, and then the third is the subgroups that align to the health and all policy areas. So those are the three main things from this paper. It starts off obviously with the feedback from the day, and unless Julia is able to join, I can go through it if we need to. But we try to capture the the main points and main comments from the day from members.
Yeah.
Shall we give it a minute?
Yes.
I do remember, just whilst Craig's doing that, also we had quite a discussion about how we interact with other boards and what value we get. Oh, here we go, I think. Yeah. So there was discussion around that. Julia, can you hear us?
I can, Chair. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Excellent. So we're just on that first agenda item and just discussing that. And I wondered whether you wanted to run through it a little bit.
Of course, let me just bring it up, Chair. It was just the feedback from the day that we had when we all met to have a look at the focus on the purpose of the Wellbeing Board. And I think just to pick up some of the key points that came out of that. Let me just bring up my notes that I've got. Just bear with me 1 second. I think it was really important to understand the added value that the Wellbeing Board can bring. It was that power that it has, not necessarily the delegated authority from the board meeting, but where it can bring things together, all those ideas that were coming from the local authorities, and actually where there was best practice at the different local authorities and picking up on that and making that kind of West Midlands wide was really important. So I think it was a really good day, and I think we also had a chat about how we would look at the new Mayor's Advisory Council, bringing together that expert advice and feeding that up into the Wellbeing Board, where they can actually, so they can focus on that more strategic level once they've got that expert advice feeding through into it. So I think it was actually a really good day. And hopefully we can build that into the terms of reference now for the Wellbeing Board and take that back to Combined Authority Board to improve those. I think it will also help to address those health in all policies, because again, it is that overarching approach that the Wellbeing Board can have, that better connection with the work being carried out at local levels. I think we've picked up on that, to making sure there's not duplication. So where there's that we're not taking anything away from the local level, but actually we're enhancing it, we're adding value to it at the higher level. Engagement with other directors in the Combined Authority. Again, I think that was something that was quite interesting to be picked up, that actually you have very good kind of engagement with perhaps Mubashir's team and the communities and health team, but it's how do we reach out to the other communities, including transport as well, where actually we can bring in it's thinking wider, isn't it? So that we're focused, not just focusing on the well-being necessarily, but actually how can transport help, how can planning help, how can those different areas actually help with the health in all policies across the West Midlands. See if I've missed anything in here. It's the leverage as well. That was the big thing that kept coming through. It was how we actually use the leverage that we have at the Combined Authority, and those connections again with central government, I think, to really kind of highlight what needs to be done across the West Midlands and the area, consistency of approach, and to use it, and I've said it already, I think those coordination powers more effectively in relation to matters. And I think we talked about tobacco control as well, and items like that, really kind of cross-cutting items that affect everybody within the region. And I think that's mainly the main bits I probably want to pick up. But I think the other sort of the last bit is, again, not losing that passion from a local level. So it's how you don't, it's bringing the two together, isn't it? So it's the passion and the knowledge and the understanding of what's going on in the communities from a local level, bringing that up to the Combined Authority level, and then using that leverage to actually make a difference. But I thought it was a really interesting day, and hopefully it will start to make a difference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julia, very much. Does anyone want to add anything that their reflections on this? Yeah, Karen.
I'm just a little concerned that all this work's gone in and then we look at the agenda.
And
Today.
everybody said they wanted to be in person.
Yes.
It is very
Is this-
disappointing.
This doesn't work if we're not all engaged.
I agree.
So I think a little bit of work behind the scenes
I
needs
agree.
to happen to get people back around the table, whether it's physically or whether it's
Exactly.
online.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I would like at least, you know, once or twice a year to have a physical meeting. Yeah, I think it's asking too much, but.
I think, one thing I would say is if we can encourage obviously in-person meetings, but continue to include that virtual option, the hybrid option, we may at least have more engagement. And the fact that what we're proposing within this, on the back of the conversation, then, as Julie mentioned, trying to take advantage of some of the other areas within the combined authority. The two key things that we've proposed are a broader engagement with the health system through the Health Equity Advisory Council, and then the sub-boards which align to the health in all policies area. So, for example, the health and employment group that we've proposed that one of the councillors, actually Councillor Tony Coach.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, apologies, Councillor, if you see this recording, I butchered your name, but we talked about you wanting to lead that group. Now, what we have then done is we've looked across, and within the Skills Advisory Board, the Employment and Skills Advisory Board, there's a subgroup there around labour market participation, which has similar terms of reference to what we're trying to do with the focus on health. So the idea is actually to merge those two subgroups and then have it actually report both into the Wellbeing Board as well as into this Employment and Skills Advisory Board. That brings together a joint kind of arrangement. It also answers that question what the members said on the day about having more input and influence within other areas. And we want to try and pilot that first with health and employment, but then potentially do that across the board with all of the boards. And these sub boards to then be led by members from the Wellbeing Board.
That makes complete sense. And I think that would be really valuable, having those sort of groups bridging across the different board meetings. I mean, transport was another one which we discussed, which you talked about, Julia. And I just do know, in particular, transport's one of the areas that we've discussed quite a bit in the past, in particular, the challenges around accessibility and you know, how people can use it to get to work or to get to where they need to be. And it may well be that might be the next aim. But if we can get one set up and running and we start to get feedback from that, I think there's value there.
Absolutely. I think you've got two questions.
Yeah. Yep.
Julia and Julie.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't that, sorry, did Julia want to go first?
I don't know the chair's prerogative.
No, do go first and then we'll bring Julia in.
I wasn't at the development day, so I've just looked at the report and so on, and then particularly the conversation we had about engagement with the council and so on around this.
Yeah.
Because what's missing from the report itself, the development day, and I'm sure it's just not been included in the report, is the importance of communities. Yeah. And of course within this patch, the geography reside the vast majority of populations that have huge needs, both from health perspective and as a consequence of lots of other perspectives which then feed into that part of it really. And so in a lot of these things that you're talking about, and in the way the objectives are phrased, it doesn't actually it doesn't refer to it. I'm sure it's implicitly in there, but I think when something's implicit, it can get lost in the hurly-burly of the discussions, and it might be helpful just to emphasize the importance of that particular set of communities, whether it be defined by poverty or by ethnicity or by other different categories or disability or whatever it might be. So that was really the point I wanted to make. And connecting that with the previous discussion on engagement, I guess what the board would expect is its council colleagues to both represent their constituents in its widest sense, but give particular emphasis to those people with the greatest needs in their patch, and be able to interact with those needs, with those communities in quite an effective way from the board's perspective, because we don't want to lose the voice of those communities who find it difficult occasionally to get themselves heard. So that's really what we're getting at, is in the way you've described the governance part of this.
Yeah.
May I come back on that one just really quickly?
Yes, of course.
So I
Comment.
absolutely agree, Julie, that that's something that we absolutely need to spell out, because the expectation from us is, as a combined authority, the engagement obviously happens at a very hyper local level. Community engagement is a local activity, and the local authority members, the councillors who are members of the Wellbeing Board, we expect for them to be able to speak on behalf of those communities. But to be able to explicitly say that, I think is a good point. And the other thing about special groups with most needs, I think, again, inherent in our approach towards health inequalities, we have prioritized groups that we want to focus on. So be that ethnic minority groups, which was the challenge from the first Health of the Region report, or and the subsequent Health of the Region roundtable that we continuously hold for community engagement, but also our disability working group, which has the citizens' voice next to it around the voice of the disabled people. So it is something that we are doing, but again, we have not spelt it out like you say, and I think we should. You're absolutely right on that.
Just got something buzzing through my head, Julia, before I bring you in. And I think one of the work that the Young Combined Authority have been doing as well, it's very valuable to them, but with it, and in a way it's a group, but within that group, you've got a subgroup as well. You start sort of dissecting down these groups, and it's quite a challenge and quite interesting. And I think we have to understand at some point we have to take an overarching position to try to get best value and benefit, but within that try to capture those voices as well. So the challenge you put out to us is absolutely right, but it's how do we engage with communities, and at what level within those communities do we make those connections? I think that's the thing for me. Sorry, Julia, I've started a whole load of discussion here.
Quite all right, Chair.
Stu, Karen.
I think it's really important that we reflect those points, but that we do it in the context of the work of the combined authority. We don't have the health duty, and therefore everything we do around health has got to link to what the combined authority can actually do. And some of those functions around hyperlocal working with communities still sit with the relevant authorities. So we're thinly spread enough as it is, and I think we've got to keep that focus on the combined authority role.
You're absolutely right, and that's really helpful to say that. So it's always been, what additionality can this board through the combined authority bring, rather than to reinvent the wheel that's already been done in the member organisations.
Yeah,
that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Julia.
Sorry, Chair, it was picking up one of the earlier points when we were talking about attendance, and I think that's part of what we want to do here. If we can get the right items on the work plan, we get the right people around the table, we can actually highlight where we are adding that value and that additionality, then members be able to see where we're actually making a difference, and we need to highlight where we're making a difference and when we're adding that value in, and hopefully that will encourage people to attend and want to take part and want to engage with the group. So hopefully it's all part of the same thing, and by looking at the terms of reference and actually really making it clear the role of the Wellbeing Board, then we will see people attending and wanting to attend and wanting to take part, and because they know that they can make a difference, and that's the main thing with this, isn't it? Actually making a difference for the communities across the West Midlands.
Definitely, and I do think you know that there's challenges in other boards about attendance as well. So I think the interesting work, if we start doing, if we start with the employment group and we work across these two boards, actually there might be some interesting outcomes that would be value to both boards, really.
I think so.
Simon, you wanted to step in.
Yes, I'm very sorry I could make it today, but thank you for getting me dialed in. Just 3 points around the community engagement. Absolutely agree with members' comments about understanding the added value the CA role has, but the importance of that community voice. One approach that we're trying to look at is what is the insight and intelligence telling locally that we need to do at CA level to improve transport, to improve health, to improve those opportunities around our future housing provision in the region, from the insight gained from local communities. So we have to begin to develop that system where we get the information coming up, and I think that's one of the opportunities by having that those advisory groups with those terms of reference. On that disability work, for which you do have a terms of reference for the disability working group in your papers, we are looking at strong representation from disabled citizens, and we're investing quite heavily in terms of strengthening our West Midlands Combined Authority Disability Network. We want to drive that work through a series of needs assessments. Take transport needs assessment, which we're looking to develop with our transport colleagues, both locally and regionally, to begin to really understand what works, what doesn't work, what needs to change if we are going to deliver an inclusive and accessible transport programme in the West Midlands that is responsive to the needs of disabled people. So if we can look at that approach of how do we gather insight, how do we drive that needs assessment with individuals and ensure there is that community representation and involvement at the heart of our decision making moving forward, that gives a good opportunity to respond to those issues that are just raised.
Yeah, membership.
So just coming back to another point, the key point, the Health Equity Advisory Council that's been proposed within the paper. And we had a conversation about it at the development day, and there was a wider agreement that this will, as long as it is distinguished and distinct, it can play a helpful role. So we proposed, we've adjusted the terms of reference that we proposed in the paper. We've ensured the governance works in the way that the final decision still rests with the Wellbeing Board and the members here. But it also formalizes the mayor's meetings with the health system in a sense that we have sight of it here at the Wellbeing Board, and that any decisions leading to any work for the Health and Communities team actually gets decided here at the Wellbeing Board. So just a couple of points raised by Councillor Jaspel privately in an email because she was unable to make it, was very much around these points. So if there's a clear mandate and buy-in, and I think we received that at the development day with the governance team from the CA facilitating. If There's no duplication, and again, we've clarified the role this will play in terms of any pieces of work that have an impact or have an interaction with the health services locally should be seen by the Health Equity Advisory Council for input and buy-in. And once we have that, then that means when it gets discussed at the Wellbeing Board for any type of relevant work that comes out of it, we can be rest assured that the health system has fully backed it. And then the last point you raised was around the proposed membership being very health focused. Again, that is by design, again, because otherwise it would be duplicating the Wellbeing Board. So this is just some of those points that Councillor Jasper wanted to raise, but I wanted to see if any other points needed to be raised before we could finalize and set up the first meeting for the Health Equity Advisory Council.
I'm looking to see if there's any input. Sean.
Okay, just very quickly, I suppose, we think about how the Wellbeing Board has grown over years to where we are now compared to where we started.
Yep.
And I know this is, I can tell I'm back in an academic world, but I wonder whether we would consider a bit of a survey out to our members to try and understand what they think is important, why they're not attending. You know, where is the connection point between where do they see the position of this board? And I know we've done that in a number of ways already, but I do think it's really important to understand why they're not here, because the data is telling us that we're all working for the same aims.
Yes.
But clearly something's not right for non-attendance, and that might be hundreds of different reasons. But I do wonder whether there's about connectivity, about where do they see this board influencing the other bits, and what would good look like?
Yeah,
ultimately.
and what would help to improve
Absolutely,
that?
yeah.
You know, I think we need to do. I was thinking that way. I mean, there's lots of warm words, and we did have them. You know, plenty of warm words, but actually, when it gets down to, is the day right? Is the time right? You know, is there anything else that we could do to try to make the change? And maybe I think we need to send out a sort of question sheet about that, just to you know, and where is their interest? I mean, I do think by setting out these advisory groups, we can particularly focus in on people's goals and ambitions, which would start to turn it around. But I mean, Karen, you're absolutely right. We did do that, didn't we? And we did ask the questions. There was lots of encouragement about, yes, we should, but they're not here. So I think there's something about it's the nudge factor.
Yeah, and
But,
just to come back to your other point, the issue with this meeting in particular, and not having, I mean, we have two health representatives obviously here, but usually we do have representatives from the ICB. Historically, the health system has been the one that has actually engaged, and it's unfortunately only 3 or 4 members regularly engage from local authorities, which has been the issue, and we would want to be able to have a full complement of that of both sides. So now today we've kind of, you know, it's a slightly different case, but you know, I think it's not just on the members. I think there's something about pre-engagement that needs to happen, and that once we agree these advisory panels, these groups, I think there needs to be better engagement from myself and my team with the members to make sure that we are addressing their points within the meetings as well. And once they take leadership roles within some of those advisory panels, I think it will automatically start to get kind of reinvigorated, hopefully. That's the point. But to the point about the health equity, the reason why I'm going through that is because I will go back now and set up the first meeting if I have the permission from the board. I also want to point out that we have set out terms of reference for the disability working group, and the last thing, and the physical activity board. So any comments on either of those would be very, very important. The other thing that we haven't talked about, but we have a guest here to speak about, is the Commonwealth Games Legacy Enhancement Fund, the Inclusive Communities Fund, that and the portion specifically of that fund that focuses on well-being that the board agreed to have oversight of. And we wanted to give you an update on how that will work and what that will look like. And I think it fits better within this governance paper rather than bringing it in under the HLD update. So we have Helen Frost here, who is going to introduce herself and has a presentation for us to go through as well.
Okay, we're going to take that now then.
I think it makes sense to have in governance.
Yeah, just before we do, I just wanted to talk a little, or we can come back about it. You know, we've got 3 advisory council groups or whatever advisory group that we're looking at here, which I think you know is sort of beginning to shape that. I just wanted to check if we're appreciating. We've got Councillor Jaspel's comments in. Karen, was there anything further that you wanted to, I mean, some are going to be more advanced in the employment one. I think it's a good idea to start with one and take that forward. But actually what does strike me is the disability board is not that far away from being well shaped up. You know, we've obviously got names in the frame, so to speak. And that could perhaps be the next one to go. That feels to me as if it's probably right, albeit you know, physical activity one may be one that we take not that long afterwards. So I think if we do it in that sequencing, that feels the way forward.
I think you're right.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So we'll. Sorry, Simon.
Yes, on the disability point, Chair, I think that really demonstrates the value of the work the Wellbeing Board has done over the past couple of years around to get in a position whereby we're really strengthening disabled citizens' voice. We have a very much connected multi-stakeholder relationship. We now have that platform to begin to explore those areas around being an exemplar region. We've identified the key players in the system. We want to build that with citizens, and we want to accompany by that with local authority representation. And what we're seeking today is to enable us to get some communication out to local authorities seeking their representative on that disability working group alongside OHID and alongside ICB. So we do have that representation by the local authorities alongside those stakeholders and the citizens to drive that work forward, reporting back into the Wellbeing Board.
Okay, well that's helpful, and I think you know we've been down this path before, and I think there was some real value in taking it forward, and we got some really good feedback from groups who talked about access and talked about the opportunities. So I think it would be very easy to reinvigorate that one and get that set up again. So I do see that as an opportunity, but to populate the membership would be a good step forward. So would Simon take that one on? Yes. Yeah, thank you, Simon. Okay, Helen. I think if there's nothing else at this point, can we move to you, please?
I just wanted to check with Simon. Was he going to present a slide that shows what the oversight part looks like before I launch into the presentation? Okay. Otherwise, I'm happy to present.
That is listed in the papers. It's on page 8.
Just because it gives everybody the framing.
Yeah.
Shall I just provide some context?
Yeah.
Here? Yes. We brought papers to the Wellbeing Board over the last 12 months around the Commonwealth Games legacy and enhancement funding. And very early days that we talked about what would be our priorities for investment, as the CA board had originally allocated £2 million for health and wellbeing. The CA board made a decision not to invest £2 million into health and wellbeing, but direct that investment to support Sandwell Council with its community opening of the aquatic centre and particularly the energy costs. But the CA board did agree that the Wellbeing Board should have an oversight role around the Commonwealth Games legacy enhancement funding investment. So on page 8, we've provided a slide which we've developed with Helen, which summarises the those functions. If it's difficult to read, that is highlighting that to understand the scale, the place and the criteria of that investment, to get an understanding around the investment potential in the region, to enable us to monitor and evaluate, linked to the Commonwealth Games legacy enhancement funding investment, what investments going into health, geographically, thematically, what we're learning from that delivery, and to provide that learning from delivery to enable us to influence what work we do in the future, where do our priorities lie. So it gives the Wellbeing Board that opportunity to comment around those investment opportunities, particularly the Inclusive Communities Fund that Helen's going to describe, but to use this as a platform of how do we begin to build our understanding and our function of providing that oversight for that Commonwealth Games legacy investment, particularly in sport, physical activity, mental health and wellbeing. And at that point, I'll pass over to Helen, if that's okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Craig, are you to launch?
Have the presentation on camera.
Yes. It's easier on the computer. The second's got new glasses. I've got bifocal contact lenses. It still does work.
Well, I hope you can see the screen all right. We'll all go hide up there. So thank you everybody for letting me come along today. This is basically to give you some early indications of how the Inclusive Community Grants is performing since its launch. We won't be able to fully address what that oversight role looks like, but I think this will give you a really great taster of how it's starting to perform. So the grant was launched on the 6th of November and is being delivered by Heart of England Community Foundation in partnership with United by 2022, the legacy charity. The contract was awarded through a competitive tender process, and the contractors were able to mobilise the grant application for the 4 grants, the communication strategy and the communication engagement plan in 7 weeks from the contract being signed. That hard work and effort by the team at Heart of England and United by and the wider sector has been astounding, and it's been a real testament to the support that the legacy of the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games has in our region. So before I give you an update on how the grant has performed in this first month, as this is still early days, I just want to ensure that you've got an overview of what the grant is and what it's aiming to do. So this will be broad. I imagine it will probably get you thinking about different groups that you know within the region and who needs to head our way. So I can direct you towards where you can get that actual applicant information afterwards. But this is about just getting some idea of what it is and what your role can be in this. So there are these 4 grants, and they're available across all of the constituent and non-constituent areas of the combined authority. that first small grants pot that goes from 500 to £15,000 has a lighter touch application and a rolling deadline, and awards are made by delegated authority to ensure that community groups can access the payments far more quickly. And we hope that these will be taken up by grassroots organisations. And so to ensure that that happens, there is an income cap of £500,000 on an organisation. So once you start to be an organisation that's bigger than that, this is not the grant for you. The medium grants is that really lovely area where you expect to see that programme of activity that happens over months that allows some intensity of work with community groups, by community groups. And then these, and no income limits across these other three. The large grants, we anticipate this is where you'll see consortium-led applications. And one of the things that will be in that, with it being such a large amount of money with such a short amount of time to spend it, is their ability to demonstrate that they have had grants like this before and they can spend that within the allotted time. And then the final one is the small works and refurbishment, which from £500 to £100,000, you can see is quite a large amount, but that is for any organisation that owns its own premises or has a lease to be able to do those small pieces of work that they would like to do to their building to be able to get more community members utilising it. The caveat of that is that planning permission has to be already in place. These have to be projects that are ready to go.
Can I ask a
yes.
question?
Yes, of course you
on
can.
this slide? So, that's really short deadline.
The short deadline is because the whole grant has to be spent by December 2024, ready to submit all evaluation to DCMS.
And I guess, so it's a commitment rather than the project off and running. Is there?
No, the spend, so that's the application deadline. And then that spend has to be with that community group and spent by December 2024. It's so short.
Yeah.
That's why we can't really sort of engage in those speculative capital projects, because we know what can happen with timelines there. So they've got to be those ready to go.
And so the critical factor of that is going to be communicating it out, and what, you know, what's the total pot as well.
So the total pot is the £9 million. That we have some loose guidelines about how we think the spend will go, but we didn't want to actually nail that down because we want to be able to see what projects are coming through, what it looks like, and to give ourselves.
And that total pot, does that wrap all four in?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, next slide. I'm trying to press the buttons on my So, as Simon mentioned, we have got the fund themes. That first one covering sports and physical activity, and the second one capturing mental health and wellbeing. To add into this pot, we also put in arts, culture and creativity, because once you start to look at that overlap with mental health and wellbeing, you've got really lovely opportunity for people to engage in activities. £2 million has been allocated for local community-based events, and obviously that will go across all three. And in that application guidance, these, although they sit separately on that slide, we understand that a sports and physical activity project will probably help mental health and wellbeing, or if you've got a dance project, you're kind of covering all three. So applicants can tick multiple boxes to show what their project really looks like, rather than trying to shoehorn them down a direction that doesn't cover the fullness of what they're trying to do. Next slide, please. I just wanted to also refresh, or I think in this case it might be actually tell you what that governance structure will probably look like. The Wellbeing Board will offer that oversight and support, so it's really lovely to be able to talk to you about it today. And you have quarterly meetings. You've then got the inclusive communities team, which is me and Cash, that's just sitting behind me. And we've set up meetings with a local authorities officers group, and they will meet every 2 months just so that we can keep those channels of communication going. We meet weekly with Heart of England and United By, because this is a very fast moving programme. So we want to make sure that we've got that in real time communication about what it's looking like in place, what those grants are looking like, and to really build a great relationship there. We're also just in the middle of the process of recruiting our evaluation partner organisation. We separated that out from the people that are delivering the grants, because we know that it's such a large amount of money to be spent so quickly that we didn't want the focus on how we learn from what's going on to be lost in the simple delivery of the grants. So they will come on board in the new year, and that will offer us that opportunity to try to do some evaluation differently, to really learn with the communities as we go through this. And then I wanted to just make reference to that, how grants are made. I'm sorry, I updated the slide last night. That's just slightly wrong, but under £15,000, it is awarded by delegated authority. So those small grants, the grant officers within Heart of England can make those decisions to get that money happening quickly. And over £15,000, we will have community grant panels that will be on rotation to support making decisions.
So can I ask a question about that? Because
Yes.
you've got 2 of the allocations which are on a 4th January deadline
yeah.
date, but technically, so I kind of want to understand how the split happens, because you could end up with really an awful lot of smaller grants or medium-sized grants coming forward who aren't, and the deadline isn't the 4th, and there could be a big spend up on that, which then takes away the opportunity for large grant allocations or for capital grant allocations, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So how are you going to understand the demand and the requirement and the split without effectively, it's just, how's it going to work?
So it is incredibly difficult, and in the early days of designing this, we had a steering group that involved some of the national community grant making organisations and regional ones. And there is no hard and fast answer. We've been told it's art and science. So in those early days of designing it, we have created projections of what different splits could look like, but we've never nailed it down to something that has to be, as you hit this point, you've spent it, because we want to be able to have that flexibility to see what's happening within the West Midlands as these come through. It's going to probably look like a bell curve, because we've launched, and this will come out in a few later slides. We have done a massive, or the organisations have done a massive communications and engagement outreach tour, and also we do need the money to be spent sooner rather than later. So I think what we are going to see is a large spend as we come through this period into the new year that starts to peter out, and actually we don't really want to be still handing out funds beyond September next year, because otherwise the time to actually spend the money has disappeared. So can you see there are no sort of categories of answers?
It's
tricky.
A tricky one.
Yeah. So those community grant panels at the moment are being recruited. Their training happens very early January, ready to start making some decisions from late January onwards. And so with the connections that you guys do have in this room. If there are people that you think would be really great for that, please come and find me and I can connect you.
I'm quite sure that every local authority would have community officers, I mean, you know, I absolutely know that we have who are sort of plugged into local community groups and who know, you know, what's emerging, what grants people are looking for, and who's in need. So I think touching base with the community officers within local authorities, we pretty quickly be able to populate that.
Yeah, I mention it's the smaller orange box to the side of the Inclusive Communities team. We've gone out and found them.
Yeah.
We've had our first meeting already, and they were an absolute wealth of information to support that. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you some really fantastic statistics or figures that we've got from this very first month. I want you to think about this. This is 20 days worth, 20 working days worth of work. Heart of England and United By were able to put on 45 briefings that reached over 1,500 people during that time. There are 628 applications in progress, and 104 of those applications have been submitted.
To the grant group.
To the grants.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So they get filtered out before. Do they get filtered out then?
So the applications in process is the ability for Heart of England to look at their website and see who has started an application, and they've got that ability to, you know, put in some words, come away, think about it. 104 of them have been submitted. So in that first 3 to 4 weeks, 104 different community organisations managed to get a funding application from start to completion into that system. And with the delegated authority, this doesn't actually sit within the first month because this happened last week. The first 8 awards were made for small grants. I'm sorry I can't tell you more about them because from making it, you then have to have that conversation with the organisation, sign contracts, and then that's when you can start to announce it. But I think that is a phenomenal amount of activity to happen within that first month. Yes, Mubashir.
Just 2 points. So really appreciate the hard work that's happened. So I'm really quite impressed. So well done to the team on that one and to Heart of England. The question I have, and it's not a challenge, but you know, it is sort of a challenge, sort of gonna be a challenge, is with the delegated authority, the awards that have been made, what is the link to that then to the oversight at the Wellbeing Board? So how are we engaged if the awards have already been made? That's one thing. And then the second thing is how will we be engaged for the larger ones?
Yes.
And the second challenge is then what are we using? What importance is being given to the Mental Health Commission findings in selection of projects which are related to mental health and even sport and physical activity, because that's was something in there as well.
Yeah, perfect. I've got, so the part, this is looking behind the curtain. The Wellbeing Board, the oversight will actually be about those awarded grants. The oversight does not come in any part of the grant making process. That was an early decision made that actually gives us the ability to say that we don't have any influence over the types of grants that are being made. So that happens fully within Heart of England. In our future reporting and our future systems, which I'll talk about on a later slide, I can demonstrate how I want us to make sure that we've got a really actionable and useful relationship with both those that are awarded and also those that are not awarded, so that we are starting to capture information and data about our communities. The second point about the Mental Health Commission, that is built in to the training of the people who are making the assessments for the awards. So they do have that's there to support decision making, to give them those pointers. And also it's there as a pointer for applicants who want to think about types of projects and things that we are thinking about as a combined authority. So I hope that gives you that information to know that we've built it in to the bedrock of it, but we're not using it as an actual marker. Yeah. Does that answer?
Simon.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think Helen's done a brilliant job there. So so I'll let her press on.
Thanks, Simon. Comment for a compliment.
Oh, yes, there.
Sorry, just one question, because I think it relates to the grant awarding. I was just wondering how, in the process, you're going to sort of assess, well, whether you're going to assess balance, whether that's geographically around inequalities, around your different themes, to have that sort of overarching programme kind of impact.
Yeah. So again, back to a place where there are no hard lines around this, but there are guiding principles underneath it. We've taken into account population across local authority area, indices of multiple deprivation to be able to guide things, and then constituent and non-constituent members. And basically we've created a pool within that, a sort of a minimum expected spend across areas. However, we never want to describe it as that or put it down as a hard line, but we've basically created where we would expect good to look like within each local authority area.
Can I bring Karen?
Yes.
Just to say that I've checked and it's gone out on Birmingham's Neighbourhood Development and Support Unit's newsletter.
Oh, that's
with the link to the website. And within that distribution, there are smaller networks of organisations, and I'm sure it's happening right across the CA area.
Yeah, thank you. That's really lovely to know. And I think there's something that I'd really just like the Wellbeing Board to think about in this is that first month of launch. And one thing that we really want this community grant to do is to reach the underserved and overlooked. And within that first month, we know that it's going to be people that are ready to apply for funding, who have capacity to apply for funding and know the system. And so we are very cautious and careful in ensuring that we know that they will be great projects, programs and activities, but ensuring that as we go into the new year and we work with those other areas, that we've still got money to be able to support them through that. And one of the other things around that is with the small grants that you can apply a second time afterwards, because we want to build confidence.
I think it'd be really good for the board to have visibility of how the allocations are going out and to sort of see that during, over the period of time. So I think it would be helpful to try and build that into.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it will be of interest.
This is exactly what we're looking to do for you.
Maybe even a step further is and again, this is just a suggestion, but I think it'd be valuable if those projects that do end up getting funded, that link to the commission findings are we have more of a direct kind of link directly to those organizations that are delivering it, and to be able to kind of work with them to ensure the link back to those recommendations, and so not necessarily in choosing who does what, but if there are organizations that have bid for projects that align to the commission findings, that would be brilliant if actually Rachel and team could be able to be involved with that and be reporting back to the Wellbeing Board, so that we are following through on the legacy of the commission.
I agree with that, and I was also at one point in my head I was also thinking perhaps during the year we should be looking at delivery against it, because there is a time limit on that. But in fact, I don't think that's our remit. I think that's the remit of scrutiny. And I think perhaps we should be asking them to probably do that. But what I would be interested, and I would suggest members would be interested, is outcomes. So I think, you know, we want to see what difference it's made, you know, whether it's helped improved membership of groups or, you know, whatever. So,
Lovely, you're doing the slides for me.
so plenty more to follow.
Yeah.
Just slightly conscious of the rest of the agenda. How many more slides?
There's only, I think there's 1-2 more
No,
slides.
Super.
Because and this, so this is what that timeline looks like, and this is
Yeah.
exactly what you were
Ah.
speaking to.
Oh, good.
What, if you look at all of those points that the Wellbeing Board meet over the time frame of this grant, what it looks like when I come to see you guys is going to change across the time of that. And I think these first 2 will probably be where we're looking to see where the grants are landing in the right places. And then I think we will transition into a stage where we're talking about what's on the ground, how it's meeting the commission, what some of those projects look like, perhaps as a deep dive. And then as we head towards the end of the year, that's where we'll have a lot more learning and being able to see what the outcomes from different grants look like. Go on to the next one, please. And then this is
Perhaps take on board that issue about scrutiny wanting to look at delivery against allocation.
yes,
Yeah.
but a lot of that is built into the evaluation work and Heart of England's contract. This is just some early information about what the outreaches look like. Obviously, this is about where we have gone to be able to talk about the grants, and there are some gaps within that, and they are being picked up over the next couple of months. But this is just what happened in those first 3 to 4 weeks, and there was a hell of a lot of online engagement because the demand outstripped the supply very, very quickly. So yeah, this sort of represents that 1,500 people plus coming along, and doesn't include all of those one-to-one meetings, all of those other parts that are happening around that. Next slide, please. Oh my goodness, I didn't think about the size of that writing at the bottom there. What you were looking at here.
Glasses, I should have the distance ones on, yeah.
The orange and the pink.
I've got my distance ones, but I've got the sunglasses.
What you're looking at
Yeah.
is sports and physical activity and mental health and well-being being the 2 largest sectors there that people are actually applying for. But the caveat around that is this just represents that first 104 applications that have been submitted. And so I didn't want to go too much into this part that you will be very interested in, because we're actually only ever talking about 104 applications that happened in the first 3 weeks. But this is the level that we will be able to look at the whole region with, and be able to look at the geography as well. And one of the other really great things in this is that it became very difficult to just go by local authority area, because so many of the applications are about different areas coming together, with at least 2 areas, up to 4 to 5 areas of the West Midlands, looking at projects where they work together. Any other questions? Oh, I think I've taken up enough
I
of your
think you've
time.
had quite a few on the way, really. I'm sure there would be quite a lot. I think it would be probably useful to have this on the agenda in March as well, just to sort of develop those questions, because, you know, hopefully we'll have more people, and hopefully they'll be more engaged and interested in the question. But I'd be interested to sort of know how we're looking at small grants, how we're looking at the large grants, the capital ones. So that will develop, I think.
We will have a lot more information on that for our next.
Won't you? And whether it's working, you know, how you sort of split the total pot.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Thank you for your input.
Great, thank you very, and what sort of applications would be good to know?
Yeah.
I'm sure all of that will come, won't it? Yeah. Okay, shall we move on, but thanks very much for that. So I'm just having a quick look. So really that moved into the item 5 agenda. And I think there's certainly more to come on that. But if we then move on to the next one, which is the Health of the Region report, and
I'll start us off.
you're
and
going
then-
to start us.
Yes, and then Rachel will come in.
I'm
We have a
not going to
presentation.
be rude. I'm just going to get.
No, please do.
I'm listening.
And on email, sorry.
Are we dialing her in?
But Rachel's here, it's just the
Oh.
presentation's being put up.
Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
right, okay. You may start then.
So this is the other substantive agenda item for today, which is the Health of the Region report, the 2023 report. The public paper was a cover paper just outlining what the report covers. But the members have been given a copy of the draft report that you will have seen. If not, we're going to swiftly take you through some of the key things in the presentation today. But just to say that the publicly available report was a cover report that has the reference to the draft report, which has been shared with 2 members for comment. What we want to do is to be able to receive your comments back and then be able to finalize the draft and publish the report in January. So just on the point of the Health of the Region report, we published our first report in 2020. Next slide, Craig, please. So the focus of this report is very much on the combined authority and what the combined authority can do, the role it can play in improving the health of the region. In the report, we've kind of covered into a little bit of a statistical background as to the poorer health outcomes that continue to plague the region and the impact that productivity and growth can have within our region, and some of the key conditions, the wider determinants that influence some of those health outcomes that we're going to go through, and how the directorates within the combined authority and the devolved responsibilities of the combined authority specifically can play a role in improving those. Next slide, please. In 2020, obviously the report was our first look into the health inequalities that exist within the region. It was in during and right after the pandemic, and a lot of those inequalities were exacerbated during that period. We set ourselves some challenges and some over 50 commitments across the region with partner organizations. And within the report, we're just going to touch upon a few of the points that we've covered since then. I think the Health of the Region Roundtable that continued to take place, we presented back on the progress along with some of those commitments. And I think at the last roundtable, we decided to close on that because I think the majority of organizations had actually gone above and beyond those commitments, especially since the establishment of the integrated care boards in the region. And so this time around, the report is very internal focused and quite looking at what the combined authority itself can do. And I'm going to bring in Rachel to take us through some of the highlights of what the report is going to cover.
Thank you. Okay, so in the report we outline several I guess impacts and that looking at the data from 2023 compared to back in 2020 when this report first was published. So the first one is the decrease in life expectancy, and thirdly we're seeing our life expectancy rate falling at a faster rate than the national average in the WMCA area. We can also see that where we live in the region impacts how long you can expect to live for, and you can see they're broken down by the 7 authority areas, you're almost 4 years, you're more likely to live 4 years longer if you live in Solihull than if you do in Southwell. We break it down into preventable deaths, and we have some information here around under 75 mortality rate from preventable disease, and we break this down into cancer, cardiovascular diseases and respiratory diseases, and you can see for all three we are rated either red or amber depending on where we are in the WMCA area.
Can I just check? Sorry, just ask a question, largely because I've got the wrong glasses on. So are they in those grouping cancer, heart, respiratory, in that? And so that end one, which varies slightly, Coventry,
Yes.
The respiratory is the
respiratory is the end one. I can do on the final report, I'll make sure that's labelled up so it's really clear as to what area it is. In terms of causes of preventable disease, we have the WMCA area has higher levels of people who are overweight or obese in adults, and also in children. We've seen that rate significantly increase across all the WMCA areas since 2013-14. We also have adult smoking rates that remain largely unchanged, other than potentially Wolverhampton, where we've seen a significant reduction since 2014. The WMCA area reports some of the lowest levels of physical activity in England, with 5 of the 7 local authorities in the 15 least active areas in England. And we also have a higher rate of alcohol-related deaths than the national average. So quite a worrying picture. In terms of the causes, we have increasing number of children living in poverty, and we also have some of the highest rates of fuel poverty in the country. So 2 really kind of challenging areas there, and something that will have a huge impact on the population health in the region. There are some positives. There's been a reduction in the number of 16 to 70-year-olds not in employment, education or training since 2018. We've also seen that there's been progress in reducing the gap between those with a physical or mental long-term health condition and their overall employment rates. And we've also seen improvements for self-reported wellbeing within the area too. So while we're focusing on the wider determinants in this report, we know that 80% of what makes somebody's health is determined outside their kind of access to healthcare. So taking into consideration the socioeconomic factors like education, income, the social support, community safety, the physical environment that we live, and our health behaviours. So things like tobacco use, diet and exercise, and alcohol use. So there's a whole host of different determinants which impact our kind of overall health and well-being. So kind of looking at the WMCA's role in improving these health outcomes, we've tried to make it really clear in the report that we know we can't do this alone. This is a collaborative effort. Our NHS and local authority partners have that kind of clinical equalities focus through Core 20+5. And we also have our local authority areas addressing the kind of specific needs of their populations through the health and wellbeing strategies and the work of the public health teams. We can do some work in kind of shaping the conditions that influence our residents' health through our devolved responsibilities in our kind of key policy areas. And we've got those kind of listed there as transport, housing, energy, environment, skills, employment and economy. And we can do that through our role as convener, as advocate, as commissioner and in delivery, across our core responsibilities, and also by leveraging investment across the region. So implementing health in all policies. It needs strategic consideration at all levels of the organisation, and we need to be really kind of proactive in pushing this forward. It was proposed to the Wellbeing Board in early 2022 and was favourable in its approach, and since we've been using the Health and Equity Impact Assessment tool. And it is in the single assurance framework, but it does need embedding further, and we need to do more work to ensure its effectiveness within the WMCA, so kind of really drive forward that approach throughout the organisation. We recognise there's significant co-benefits of driving health and policies across the combined authority, and it really does align and supports the inclusive growth fundamentals that we have within the CA2. And there's a part in the paper which kind of outlines how health and policies can impact each of the inclusive growth fundamentals. It also recognises that improved population health drives economic prosperity, which, if we do distribute that fairly, improves the kind of wider conditions that shape our health. And then we get that kind of virtuous cycle for the region, healthier people who drive economy and who then drive health outcomes. So within the report, there's a series of logic models that relate to our policy areas, and they have different outcomes and impacts that kind of come from each policy area. But broadly, there were 7 areas where we could see kind of expected outcomes and impacts. So the first one was around kind of enabling healthier lifestyles for our residents, improving physical and mental health, reducing health inequalities, safety and injury prevention, access to healthcare and environmental health. So it really kind of demonstrates a real wide range of impacts. But those impacts are subject to a range of assumptions, and we do kind of outline that within the report, that the logic models have different contexts, different inputs, and it is a chain of causation rather than statistical testing. So finally, next steps. So we looking to publicise this report in January 2024, and we have a roundtable event on the 13th of March 2024, where we'll kind of use as the health of the region report to set the context of the health landscape of the West Midlands Combined Authority area. But what we'll also do within that roundtable is highlight some of the work that supports kind of good health and kind of that progress moving forward. So we'll showcase some of the initial projects that have been kind of been allocated through the Inclusive Communities Fund, which will be really positive. And we can also explore what more we can do in partnership to improve outcomes for our residents, and look at potential impact projects to drive forward change and what we can do across the West Midlands. So that's just the kind of initial key findings. There is a lot more details in the reports, as I'm sure you've seen, but happy to take any comments. This is still a working draft, so we'll definitely be able to look at those comments and see how we can embed that into the report itself before it's publicised.
Excellent, thanks, Karen. Can I just go back to those maps?
Yes.
What are Coventry doing differently around respiratory disease, or am I getting unnecessarily hung up on something that's a marginal difference?
There is a difference, and I think that would be interesting to explore. And I think likewise, when we see things like in Wolverhampton, the smoking prevalence rates dropping, where we haven't seen that across, I think it'll be good for us to kind of really evaluate, is there something different happening in that area that maybe is kind of pushing those health outcomes? So definitely some things for us to explore onwards from the report itself, and areas of good practice. I think it's a really good point.
I'd pick that one up. And actually, what the other thing I was sort of wanting to explore, whether we need to do any work or look at around the sort of the tobacco promise or changes that have been announced. You know, actually it won't be legal to buy cigarettes by whenever it is for sort of certain age. I mean, which personally, you know, you can argue whether this is right or wrong. I think it's the right direction, but it will have a taper effect. You'd think it would, and so that's something that I think it might be useful to anticipate how that's going to impact on health of the population, and how we as local authorities, as a group of, might want to respond and to try to help that. But the challenge for us is that once you start changing it and effectively making something illegal, it goes underground, and you have no controls over what people are buying, so it can be worse, really. So I think it's anticipating things like that. And the other, so in a way, that was a bit of a comment, but it is a question about how we're going to address it. And the other comment, the other question, we've been made aware in the last week, particularly, DPHs will be more aware of this, I'm sure. We've been made aware of these recent deaths by awful opioids that are sort of being introduced, and I'm wondering whether there's anything that we should be looking at collectively. I mean, the numbers may be quite small, but it depends how it goes, because you then have a little look at America and the opioid problem there. I would loathe to think that that's the direction of travel that we're going to be going in.
So I'll take those questions if that's okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of points on so each of the things that you highlighted with the respiratory disease in Coventry and the difference, and also around tobacco, those are very much health service related and or public health related issues, and while we definitely want to be able to play a convening role where asked, I think it's a very much a space that is for the integrated care boards and local authority public health teams to look into. Having said that, I think some of those issues will potentially be the right place for the Equity Advisory Council to bring up. So what can we do across the region, and why do we see the difference in those spaces? The reason why I say that is because if we want to be able to influence national policy, we can then utilize the leadership of the mayor to be able to have that vertical influence into central government for our region. And I think that's the space for that council to be able to do. And we will, of course, as Wellbeing Board, have sight of those conversations as they occur. The second point I would say, I suppose, is on the issue around the drug-related deaths with opioid. Again, it's very much local authority public health directors' role on that one. And so I'll defer to the only candidate, the only representative we have here today. But what I will say is with the PCC controversially or non-controversially joining the combined authority from the next mayor term, whomever the mayor may be, that there might be more opportunity for us to look into, because I think more recently, again, maybe the public health colleagues can confirm, but more recently, it was a decision by West Midlands Police to not carry naloxone anymore, which is the one thing that is known to be able to prevent deaths from fentanyl, which is the big cause of concern that you've just highlighted. So again, that's something that potentially we may have a direct role to play once the PCC function comes in to the combined authority. But at this point in time, it is very much a local authority director's public health position to comment on. And in this report, we've really focused on giving a sample of what the issues continue to be in the region, but then really focusing on the bits that we can focus on and deliver through the combined authority.
Can I think you're right on that sort of look into the that influence, isn't it? When there's the convening power. I know certainly there's work going on around the drug deaths in Birmingham. I think Birmingham's big enough to look at the numbers, and there's a whole system around sort of misuse deaths. But it sounds like when the PCC come in, that's an influencing position, isn't it, and a part of the system. And can I just ask, and apologies because I haven't seen the report, I was just going to check, but I just wondered, because obviously there are massive differences across the region, but there's also massive differences within aspects of the region, recognising the influence of poverty and deprivation. Obviously you picked up fuel poverty and the children living in poverty. But I just wondered, in terms of some of the kind of key findings of your report and some of the key influences, how much is that coming through, and is there a sort of opportunity to really influence around the economics of the region, particularly the poverty?
Yeah.
So yeah, we do delve into more information in the report itself, and we can make sure that you get a copy of that too. But I think that's where the alignment with inclusive growth is really important, to make sure that as the work we're doing around economy is fairly distributed, and we are focusing on help through that, so aligning with the inclusive growth work. So I think that there is a role for us to play in that, but again, it's that I guess the recognition again that it's not just the WMCA's role, it is our kind of wider health partners in driving those issues forward as well. These are really complex challenges, aren't they, that take lots of organisational effort to be able to change. And so it's just that kind of convening. There's potentially something in the convening role there as well.
Sorry, yeah.
I'm just going to come back to Mubashir's point, which I think plays to what Karen was saying right at the beginning around this, trying to find the added value bit of it, really. And I think sometimes it's just too easy to go quickly to the particular mandate of an organisation and not push us into thinking widely about how we might use those mandates to best effect. By not getting into the detail of some of this stuff, you just go to that easy option to say it's not written down in the mandate in the way we're talking about it, and therefore we just let it lie. And I'm just wondering, and I find that the mandate that the combined authority has quite a complex thing to work through in my own head. And so if I make a mistake of what I'm about to say, please just forgive me in that. But I think that there is a piece of work here, particularly for our public health colleagues within the combined authority, to look at the detail of preventable mortality, and there is a treatable mortality set of issues, and to think about what is it that the combined authority within its mandate could actually add value to in that fight. The reason I mention this is that neither preventable mortality or avoidable mortality has actually changed since 2013. Yeah, that's a disaster for the region as a whole, for the country as a whole. So I've just got some numbers in front of me, and I just quoted for West Midlands. So the number of deaths for preventable mortality in 2018-20 is 25,000 people. Yeah, the number of deaths for preventable mortality in the West Midlands in 2001 to 2003 was 25,000 people. Yeah, clearly lots of things have changed. The demography has changed for one thing, but it is worth looking at these sorts of things and to think about the inequality around the patch. And when you do look at it, what you'll see is amongst the well-off, in whichever local authority you look at, they're better. They've had more, and it's the poorer communities that have lost. And it may well be there are things that the combined authority is doing in this mandate. The convener role is a good example, but there may be other things that we could utilise to highlight these sorts of issues and to think about what additional things can we do in the context of the systems of health that the combined authority has a major role to play in. So the answer to that work may be no, or it could be yes, but we haven't done that work, I think, to be sure which of those would be most appropriate.
And of course, every answer begs another question, doesn't it? And of course, taking into account population growth, and what does that mean? Has the shift changed on housing, on employment, on this and that and the other? I mean, one of the interesting things one of the things that I scribbled down out of that, which I thought was very interesting, was around housing. We haven't actually got, but we might be interested in setting up a subgroup around housing. And the reason I say this is because I can recall when I first became a councillor in Warwickshire, which was in sort of 2001, we had a population death gap. The gap between the north and the south was 12 years. Really looking at average life expectancy and outcomes, etc., etc. And you know, if you take into account all of that, it's around obesity, around smoking, around economy, jobs, education, all of those things. So you can't eat the elephant in one bite. It is a chipping away, and it's come down. It's now 8 years. That's 20 odd years on, because it takes that long to start changing the profile around. But it is coming down, and I think we need to at times also say, actually, we have changed the dial, because it's too easy just to sort of wear the hair shirt. You need sometimes an encouragement around that. But I think what we need to do around this sort of information is consider how we work together to try to influence. So it might be by putting in a subgroup around housing and health. We certainly reflected the poor quality of housing leading to very damp conditions, which had an impact on respiratory, I guess, things like that. So, that it's what do we do with the data? We're data rich. Do we use it as best we can? Can I invite Sean?
Thank you, Chair. And I think just a couple of reflections, and I think it's really good report, so well done you for getting that through. There's a piece on page 22, which in the report, which talks about infant mortality. It's just an interest area for me from my previous world. And it says we've seen a notable reduction. Actually, looking at the figure in the table, it doesn't demonstrate that. That's the ONS data will say it's been very static with the West Midlands still the highest level. So it might be the softening of the language, or actually demonstrating that, but it shot out at me to say that it didn't feel right. And so that was it. I do think the other bit that we've talked about here is obesity, and we've talked a lot about obesity as part of a world around the Wellbeing Board and what we can do collectively as the WMCA, where the partners around that. And I'm just really fascinated, particularly in that young person's level of obesity, that 10 and 11-year-old. We've just heard from Wolverhampton that 90% of their schools are now in good or outstanding. And I'm just wondering, actually, is there something we can see whether that will see a shift in behaviour around health and well-being, whether there's going to be a correlation between that, because actually I'm not sure whether it's an opportunity for it to be researched or looked at, but it just feels like we've talked about this historically. How do we see that? And we've heard already that there's doing some amazing work in Wolverhampton around smoking cessation. What else is going on in that patch at the moment that could be seen as really good practice that we might be able to lift? Because that's quite a significant shift in Wolverhampton. We're one of the least progressive areas around education for so many years. They've taken a step change in their positioning, and is that then going to play out into the world that we see ourselves now around health and well-being overall?
Brilliant, Simon.
Thank you. The health or policies piece, and particularly housing, is something we're beginning to really gather momentum with our housing team. But two significant bits of learning. One is that recognising and understanding the responsibilities the CA has for housing and what is the opportunity to influence change. Biggest priority to deliver 200,000 plus new homes. Very little responsibility within that social housing space. But there is a general appetite to look at how we're going to work together and work with both our systems, both housing and health systems, to begin to drive some priorities which will see policy influence and change over time. One of the significant networks we are now tapped into is the Black Country Health and Housing Forum, which is convened by a ICB funded officer in Walsall Housing Group, who is then responsible to have that hard look, particularly around social housing. And again, similar to we talked about good practice in Coventry, we can bring back what are we learning from that Black Country Forum, and is that something that could be scaled up across the region?
Thank you, Simon.
Membership.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I mean, I think Simon's been quite humble there. He's done quite a lot of work with the health and housing stuff, and to bring it across to that level where we're now actually talking about that joint working group and really working in the health and all policy space is a big achievement, and largely down to him and his engagement with housing. So well done to him. I think just coming back to Sean's point about childhood obesity and obesity in general in the region, and we talked about tobacco as well. I mean, they continue to be a challenge in our area in West Midlands Combined Authority region, and we, as part of our role, have focused quite a bit on the physical activity side and mental well-being side of those things, because we believe we have the ability to add value to work that's happening at local level on that front. There is we do walk a tightrope, and I know Jury's mentioned this. You know, we shouldn't think about mandate, but I think we have to be very careful when we start talking about you know, areas where we don't deliver ourselves, and you know, it's definitely down to local authorities who understand that data better, understand the population better, and actually have the services to be able to support them there. Now, having said that, if there's across the region, we continue to see patterns, I think we should be able to have that conversation and be able to see what is it that we could do differently, and what role, if any, a combined authority can play in convening the system to make that shift. But again, that has to be a joint conversation, and it's not something that we can dictate through. And the point of presenting this data here is not necessarily to call out any area in any way, shape, or form. It's mainly to kind of look at where we are struggling as a region, where we continue to struggle, and then what are the opportunities for us to collaborate. But definitely a big focus of this report, again, is very insular, is very much what is it that we bring to the table in shifting that dial across the region, and those happen to be in the wider determinant spaces, and sometimes in the convening space where there is buy-in from local authorities, because we have to be very, very careful on that remit front, and I think that's the lesson that we've learned from the health duty conversations as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Is there any more that we want to add to this report? Really good report, though. Thank you so much. It's always incredibly informative and guiding. So you know, and that role of influence is very much our remit, our area. But it would be useful, perhaps, just to look at those two early questions that we had. So and how that might play out. Okay.
Can I just give some next steps on the report?
Thank you.
So the report, once we've had any comments back, and I think we'll give a deadline, we'll extend it to the end of next week if we can.
Yeah.
For comments back from members. And if you have any additional comments, maybe Karen, you might need to speak with your public health colleagues to see if they want to have any comment into it. I know Justin will definitely have some comments. And
yes,
I know Jaspel, Councillor Jaspel has said that she will want John Denley's comment, and certainly we want all of the directors of public health comment. Okay. We have Jury's comments in already. Yeah. So what we want to do is finalize those comments by the end of next week, be able to take it to the executive board for the WMCA in the 10th of January, and we're going to take it to the CA board early February, and to overview and scrutiny as well. We're going to present this report in conjunction with the State of the Region report, which is very much focused across the inclusive growth fundamentals in each of those areas. So just giving you a few kind of next steps for this report and governance when it's going to go through.
Can I suggest, Craig, if it's not putting too much on you, that we write to members of the board and their officer support to give them that timeline of next week to respond to any specifics on the report, and to have any input that they might want to contribute towards that, with a guide to how it then feeds through the system.
And that's for the health of the region report. The governance one is done.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Cannot
just
go.
this, just this. Okay. Thank you very much. So we're then moving on to the high-level deliverables update, which maybe Shay, you said we're going to just run through this very quickly.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
I think this is our standing agenda item. We have this every time. It's just a quick update across our high-level deliverables that we've promised. And it's just to showcase what we said that we would do within this year. And you'll see the work that has been done across the health and all policies work so far, what we've highlighted. Like I said, in terms of the work we've done with transport, and we've carried on working through the health of the region roundtable and the core group, which alongside the Mental Health Commission recommended the real living wage region approach. And again, we've started to do some work on this, idea being that we will be holding some workshops in combination with the Real Living Wage Foundation to look at the barriers and opportunities that might exist for this to be implemented. We're starting specifically with the health and social care sector on that piece of work. Just to update on the Health Foundation funded programs. You have a question?
I have.
Okay.
I
pause.
have. Sorry.
I can sense it.
It was that sharp intake of breath, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was around the announcements, the budget announcement around the uplift in the real living wage, the impact on local authorities, which I would say is not insignificant, Karen, is it? And but it's the right kind of thing to do. It's just where the money comes from. But actually, we need to feed that into it, don't we?
Yes, and I think that's what we've been very conscious of the environment, the fiscal environment, so we don't want to go out and proclaim to be a real living wage region when we know it's very difficult for certain sectors to be able to do. So what we are trying to do is build a consensus of where those opportunities might be and where the barriers are, and what, if anything, we can learn from other areas, and bringing in the Real Living Wage Foundation to be able to help with that is the step that we're going towards. The mayors agreed that as an aim, we would want to try and see if we can be a real living wage region, but we are not compelling anyone to be accredited or be in that space. But the first step is actually just to explore some of the issues around it. And again, clearly, within the social care sector and local authorities, it's a big concern, and we don't want to complicate matters further. But
I think for me, there is a direction which has been, announced, and that's absolutely fine. Support that. For us as employers, there's a consequence to all of this. One is the affordability. Does that mean that we're going to see a reduction in workforce? So that's one of the potential consequences. And the other thing is, it squeezes the differential. So what does that mean on the way up? It may take time to understand that, but it will make changes.
Absolutely, that's the hope. And so just
Oh, yep, you're sandwiched here.
sorry, Karen.
Karen.
I know from work done on this in the past that there are employers that are willing to pay the real living wage, but are nervous of committing to it going forward. And also, and we've had this in health, organisations that technically have grades that would be below the real living wage don't have any staff on them, but again, are worried about going forward, what the commitment would be. So that's an area that needs to be worked through and challenged.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I think we'll try and build a consensus from those findings. I think it's yeah, the reason why we focused on the health sector to begin with is because it's one of the biggest employers in the region. The largest anchor institutions that we have here happen to be NHS organizations. So we'll start with there, and then we'll obviously continue and report back to the board as to what our findings are and where we want to go, if we want to go further. So that's the real living wage stuff. There's obviously we talked about the Mental Health Commission implementation and the Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund. We published the Health of the Region report, and the Sport England partnership is something that we've completed the MOU, but we're still awaiting the finalization of the initial award. And to emphasize again and again that it's an initial award of $2.5 million. What we are trying to do on the longer term partnership is something which is going to be defined by a much larger co-investment plan. And then to our Thrive programs, we continue to deliver against those. The Thrive into Work program is full scale into its delivery on this new 2-year extension. And the Thrive at Work program is coming to a close with its current form, with the funding that we have from MHPP and partners. It is coming to a close in its current form, but we are still continuing to explore options of how we take that work forward, because the workplace well-being agenda, productivity, and employment and health continue to be a big focus for us going forward, as you know. And what we want to try and do is look at what we can offer to these businesses going forward as our kind of big focus on business growth West Midlands within the region. So Thrive at Work, at the moment, it is underperforming slightly, but has picked up in the past quarter on its delivery. And we are hoping to have an end of the program event where Sean has been able to coerce colleagues from DWP to come in, and we'll have a showcase of all of the pilots under the MHPP program at that event in late March. So that's a very quick rundown of where we are with our deliverables. Happy to take questions related to any of these.
Anyone want to chip? Oh yes, Julie.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's good to see all the different areas of work that are going on, how successful things are. It's just more in terms of looking forward, really. You know, there is a new government initiative around health and work. What sort of opportunities do you guys see in terms of taking advantage of some of those initiatives that might be applicable here?
So thank you, Jerry, for raising that. So Thrive into Work obviously is the IPSC program, which is the IPS in primary care program, which we were the pioneers on in a sense, alongside Sheffield, South Yorkshire. And that program has kind of given us quite a lot of learning with the health-led trials evaluation that came out earlier this year. On the back of that, I think, or at least in part of that, because of that, there's a new program that's been launched called the Work Well program, which DWP is funding. It's a joint DHSC and DWP funded project. It is a lighter version of what we could call the Thrive into Work program, IPS program. It is more streamlined. And that money is available to ICS systems across the country to be able to bid into. Now, we've been working with OHID to try and see if we can build consensus in the region to have a joint approach to ask for funding for that. But at the moment, I believe the ICS, we cannot have a joint pre-ICS bid. It has to be per ICS system. And within that, I believe the local authorities have agreed that they are going to bid themselves. And so I think there's a little bit of conversation still to be had on that front. But we are keen to pursue this for the region because, considering we have been pioneers in this space, as well as we've been piloting as part of the Thriving to Work program, the GP FitNote trial, which links very well to the pioneer pilot that was started in Sandwell by DWP again. So we want to see ourselves as trailblazers, as vanguards in health and work in the region, and we continue to work across our wider employment and skills agenda in the Combined Authority to make sure that we're feeding into each of these areas of work, alongside the development that government is doing on universal support as well. So health and work is going to be a key initiative, a key project area for us going forward. Again, it fits into the whole health and all policies thing that we're trying to do. So
I'm wondering too whether there's I'm trying not to spread the jam too thin. That's always the challenge, isn't it? You need to make impact rather than just, scratch the surface. But the supported employer programme, how engaged is the West Midlands Combined Authority within that, rather than individual organisations?
So which supported employer
Well,
program are you referring to?
Yeah, okay, so so this is something that we've been involved with at in Warwickshire, and this is trying to encourage employers that we've been engaged with through our economic development scheme to take on people with learning difficulties or working age adults, long-term issues who are challenged to find. I mean, Sean will know quite a bit about this, I suspect. And it's not an easy route. It has some synergies with Thrive, and
So,
do you have?
yes, so I met up with Claire Cookson, who's actually the chief executive of DFN Foundation, who leads the Project Search programme nationally, and there's some real interest at this moment. They've now got 168 sites across the UK, which is really positive, of which Warwickshire was a vanguard, I think they would describe. So it's about that cohort of individuals with learning disability and physical disability into the workspace, using the anchor institutions to do that recruitment space. And working with Thrive at Work, they are aware and they're engaged with that process, as are Thrive Into Work. And I think there's been some synergy over time with the work that Mobisher has led in the connection point. But I do think it's a complicated space, as you know, and probably sits slightly outside of the DWP arena, because it sits some within DFE and some within DWP, and it's a slightly challenging position around how it sits across boundaries. So that may be something that we explore separately, but I can pick that offline with Mobisher if that helps.
Yeah. It's been very interesting journey. We kicked it off pre-COVID, and we had a launch event which I attend. I've been to 2 or 3 events since, but there's been some extraordinary stories coming through from that. We had one particular scheme where the employer said they were going to take this up. We allocated someone, and they said to the manager at the time, this person is going to come into your team, and they were dead set against it. It was the responsibility, the risk, it was going to be awful. But a year on, that particular person actually left the employment because they got a better job to go on to. It was a wonderful success story. And people with autism, are very well suited to certain types of jobs. Absolutely, which wouldn't obviously come into people's minds. But this particular manager was in tears when they knew they were going to lose this person, said the experience had been fantastic because the whole team had come together to support and welcome and engage. And the unexpected consequence was the team building effect.
And I mean, these are the same kind of stories that we have from the IPS program, that we Thrive Into Work, very much focused on, you know, the pathway that we develop for neurodiverse people and people with disabilities. It's a big focus area for Thrive Into Work, and we have similar stories. And I think, you know, that's why it's so critical to continue to support that program and support the development of the WorkWell partnerships, which will also look at something similar in terms of people with additional health needs. So absolutely big part of our agenda going forward, and we're going to coordinate.
And I'm very conscious that we need to not spread too thin. Any other questions or any other comments on this paper? In which case, I think we can, thank you, Rushia, for that. I think we're just on to the date of the next meeting, which is the 6th of March. We will work very hard to try and have that in person. Springtime. Oh, will it? It will be. Indeed, we will. And perhaps, you know, when we get in touch with people, we can do something about trying to find out what are the reasons why they don't want to be here or haven't been able to be here, so that we can try to reduce those down. Okay, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Very good.